And let's see if we're live or not. I think we are, maybe, possibly. There we go. Audio quality might be a little bit on the worse side today. That's because I'm running the AC, because turns out that the weather realized it has been summer for like a couple of months and decided to catch up on that heat that we haven't had for the last month or two here. All in this week, so it's quite hot today, and I'm not going to be streaming with my AC off when it's this hot out, because it's like 31 degrees Celsius out right now, and luckily it's only about 28 inside. But if I were to not have my AC run for the next like 2 or 3 hours, I would be dead. So AC it is. I have a noise suppressor turned on, but that might make the audio quality a little bit less than ideal. So, what are we going to do today? What we're going to do is we're going to undo a lot of work. Well, not undo a lot of work. We're going to move a lot of work from one place into another place. So, I've been working on the AI for this boss fight, and I've got another boss fight that I also need to do the AI for at some point, but mainly this boss fight is what I've been working on over the past week, right? So with this whole setup here, if you've tuned in to the streams where I battled some Kingdom Hearts bosses to analyze, hey, what do they do, how do they work? This has taken a lot of those things into consideration. I now have it set up in a structure where it has actual like distinct phases. It has entries to those phases, then it goes into those phases, and those phases have entirely separate logic. That's very similar, but it does do some things slightly differently in a very segmented way. And as I was working on all this, I actually kind of realized if I just open up phase 1 here, this is phase 1, and then I open up phase 2 and you can see it's fairly similar. It just has a couple more attacks, and then we have things like this during the move to new location. In phase 2 it also starts being able to do a projectile attack during its move if it's moving for more than 1 second. So that's what this does, right? It does move to location. One of its substate is a delay. And if that delay succeeds, we move on to the next state, which has a about 30% chance to actually be entered, at which point it will do a projectile attack. So that just adds a little bit more aggressiveness to it and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I like these different state trees for the different phases, because it lets me more easily set this all up. Would it be possible to do all that in one massive state tree? Yeah, but that's the way I kind of was doing it before, and you really get messing with values weirdly. Especially because what I also want to do is, and what I have done, is you can see, for instance, this delay here, after it moves to a new location, in phase 1, it waits for 0.4 seconds after it's reached its target location. In phase 2, it only waits for 0.25 seconds, and then in phase 3, eventually, when it does get there, it will only wait for, I think, 0.15 seconds. So its passive time also goes down with these phases, and that quickly becomes a lot more messy to deal with if you're doing it entirely within one massive state tree and just running this through like parameters. Also, doing these entry abilities, like doing a specific ability, mostly the new ability that phase gains as a potential to happen. Before going into the new phase, it becomes a little bit messy if we all do it on one massive tree. And you can see there's quite a lot going on in these trees. So that's kind of what I've been changing and tinkering with to improve the boss fight AIs. But as a result of that, I kind of figured right now what I have, right, for these special attacks, for instance, for any ability, is I have a state tree task that does an ability from the gameplay ability system. So what this does is if I open it up, it opens up on my other monitor, and it's taking a moment to load. But we have the state tree task do ability, and all that does really is it gets one of the random abilities that I give into it. It checks whether or not that class is valid, just as a validity, like protective check. And if that is valid, it gives that ability and activates it once to whatever actor this is running on, right? Then we wait for that ability to end. And when the ability ends, we have an extra delay after the ability ends, and then we finish the task. But this already is a little restrictive, because what if I want to have an ability that can end in one of two different ways, like the projectile ability that I've been working with? Do I want that projectile ability to end when the projectile gets fired? Or do I want that ability and the state related to that to end when the projectile actually hits something? Because that can be a massive difference in the aggressiveness of one of these boss fights. Is if in phase 1, for instance, it waits until you actually hit something before moving on to whatever logic is next, it is going to be less aggressive, and it's going to be a little bit more friendly toward the player to get used to the fight. But as the fight progresses and we go into phase 2 or phase 3, I might want to switch that around to an ability that finishes the moment the projectile is launched. The way I have that set up right now, I can't really give in any of these like extra parameters to this ability. This ability just fires, and if I want to have an ability that behaves differently, I need to make a separate either child or sibling class to that ability, meaning that I have a bunch of like abilities in my project that are effectively just one-off tiny variations of each other, and I don't think that's great to do. I don't like doing that, because this might seem like a pretty major difference, right? The example that I give, ending the ability in one moment or in another moment. But I also, and this is really the ability that sold me on having to change this. What I also have is I have this ability where he, where is it? In projectiles. Starting in phase 2 here, I have an ability that does multiple projectiles at once. So what it does is, instead of just spawning one projectile, it spawns a number of different projectiles. There it would be really nice if I had the capability of giving in a parameter of how many projectiles to spawn. So say in phase 2 here, multi-projectile might be it spawns 3 projectiles. Or maybe a random amount between like 3 and 5. But then when we go into phase 3, its projectile number might also go up. So it might, instead of spawning 3 to 5, it might spawn 5 to 7. If I do this purely with the gameplay ability system, what ends up happening is we only can do that if I make separate child classes of a like parent ability, like one that spawns 3, and one that spawns 4, and one that spawns 5, for instance. Whereas if this just is a state tree task itself, it just gives me an input value within the state tree for each instance of that task in any state tree whatsoever. So the difference really comes down to the way we instantiate those abilities effectively, because using gameplay ability system, the gameplay ability system is a little bit weird in some ways, and I think it is to do with the fact that it's solidly built for network replication, but everything very much comes down to classes. Even gameplay effects are like their own classes, right? You can obviously give variable amounts into those through giving them like levels and sampling from a curve, or even set by color, but for the most part, a gameplay effect is a class in and of itself, instead of just being a bit of data that you pass in, which is counterintuitive. I think it is, again, because it makes it easier for replication, because all you have to send through is saying, hey, this class just got activated. Which makes it easier for like different clients and the server to agree on things. It is what I think the reasoning behind that is. But that also means that making a slightly different version of an ability means that you have to make a different class. So the way that you instantiate different information for the same ability is to make essentially a different class. Whereas using these state trees, every single task on one of these things is effectively its own instance of one of these task objects. Meaning that I can just make one ability with a bunch of parameters, and I can easily then parameterize the tasks, and I can hook those up to parameters for the state trees themselves, and those are easily also set during runtime. It's easier to give in information to state tree tasks than it is to gameplay abilities, because again, gameplay abilities really aren't designed to be interacted with that much, aside from just firing them and letting them do their thing. State tree tasks are a little bit more open in that regard. And again, mostly it comes down to being able to parameterize a lot more data, which I think is going to make it easier to reuse some of these things. So that's kind of what I've been working on yesterday, and I figured that's actually probably a good thing to do on stream today as well. So I already have the very most basic, the very most basic thing set up within these state tree tasks instead of as a gameplay ability, just as a proof of concept, as a test. I have this basic chase and attack subtree. And this used to be a gameplay ability, but now we have this attack, which has a state tree ability, is what I call them, STA, play attack animation. And this just gets a montage to play. In this case, that's parameterized. We give it in a damage socket name that also should probably be a parameter, to be honest with you. So that's where it's going to be spawning the sphere trace to check whether or not it's overlapping with the player. The damage sphere radius, also, once again, probably good to parameterize that. Let's set the default for that to 250 and then actually select that parameter. And then whether or not we want to draw a debug, which again, might as well parameterize that as well. So this is now just a subtree with a task in it that I can easily just put on a bunch of different stuff. So I have this basic daemon. Nothing about its state tree has changed, but it's no longer using a gameplay ability. Not to be confused with the fact that I'm still using the gameplay ability system to deal with things like attributes, status effects, and all player-related abilities. Because I don't think state trees probably make a lot of sense for player-related abilities necessarily to do, because that's a lot more customizable and a lot more variable, granting and taking away abilities. AIs generally just have certain abilities that they can do, and that's a lot more finite. Like these are hierarchical finite state machines. Technically we call them state trees, but that's what they are. But the finite part of that is quite relevant. It's you set them up and then they kind of just work the way that you set them up. For the player, it might be a lot more relevant to swap in and out abilities, and doing that within a state tree probably gets a bit messy. I do want to look into that just as like a thought experiment. Could you use a state tree on your player character to reasonably substitute the gameplay ability system? Because if you can, that might be an interesting tutorial series to do at some point. So I might just play around with that a little bit in a separate testing project at some point. But first I want to do all this for my enemies, because I do think that for enemies in a single player game, it actually does make sense to just make the state tree tasks directly instead of having an ability for those. Hello, how did your game do in the GMTK game jam? Not very good, because I didn't I didn't interact with anybody at all. I didn't really play any other games because I've been really busy. I'm working a lot on this game. I'm working a lot on like work, on YouTube, on a bunch of things. And after the game jam wrapped up, I really got into doing some level redesigns for this game. And then at some point, I'd been working for like 10 days straight. Well, not 10 days. It's been about 10 days. So like the last 2 days are the first 2 days that I've not done a shit ton of work since the game jam. Aside from one day where I accidentally spent the entire day playing Factorio in the middle of it as well. But yeah, I intended to play more games from like other people to interact with, and they see your game as well. That's kind of important in these jams, right? I didn't do that, which kind of sucks. So nobody played my game almost, which is fine. I just made it to like kind of scratch an itch, and the win is that you finish a game, and that's kind of it, right? I made a game that is more or less a finished thing. And I might go back at some point to like polish it up and to make like something more proper out of it. But I made a game that was scoped appropriately for the time that I was given. I did it entirely on my own. And it was a fun thing at the end of the day. It's unbalanced probably, but that's what you get in 4 days. So yeah, we have these demon enemies, which don't use any gameplay abilities anymore at this point, but they still, like, they can damage me, I can damage them, because obviously that doesn't change anything about how that works, because my player still uses gameplay abilities. So we're going to be pretty much going through a bunch of these state trees. First, just replacing the very basic, like, just play animation attacks, because there's a bunch of those. And then going through a second pass of them and seeing any unique abilities that they have. And a fair few of them have gotten unique abilities at this point, because that's another thing that I've been working on over the whole month, last month, is giving more enemies more unique attacks, so that they're a little bit more unique and different to deal with than just they play a different animation when they attack, because that gets stale real quick. Can you make a tutorial about how to make a boss fight that has like 2 different phases? So yeah, that's kind of what I have set up here. Essentially, all that is you're just doing, at least that's the way I'm doing it now. You just play different state trees, right? You have this one state tree that has these different phases. In my case, whenever it enters a phase, I also make it do a specific attack to signal, hey, this is the start of this phase, to be a bit more consistent with how the phases start as well. And then it just goes into running the state tree corresponding to that phase, which has its own like set of attacks and all that kind of stuff. And then this phase 1 just has a transition to check if the HP is less than 60%, we move into phase 2, at which point it does a new entry ability, and then it goes into a separate state tree that does state or phase number 2. So that's the basic idea. And how you transition from one to the other, yeah, that's effectively, for the most part, that would just be an HP check, and whatever like HP system you use, it's probably just checking whether or not a value is under a certain amount. I have this condition set up, or I just check its health, max health divided, blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. State tree, behavior tree, which is better. I mean, there's not necessarily a straight up answer to questions like that usually. I prefer state trees massively because they are more intuitive in a lot of ways. And what it comes down to, if you have to choose using one over the other, state trees can function in all the ways that behavior trees can, and by default actually they will, unless you set up specific other transitions. If you just add in states with tasks, they finish up, they go back to root, they filter down, they do something, and they go back to root, which is exactly how a behavior tree works. So by default, they kind of work like behavior trees as well, but they have the possibility to also function much more like a state machine, have more things happening in parallel because you have the hierarchy to it, where behavior trees are a little bit more strict in that regard. So it's I would choose state trees 9 times out of 10. There are things about behavior trees. They are a little bit easier to provide data into from external sources and get data back out of because of the blackboard system. You can very easily get and set blackboard values from other blueprints or from C++. State trees kind of work as a black box. They can request information from the outside, but outside things can't put information into it necessarily. So that's a huge shortcoming of the way state trees work. So it's not a be-all end-all, like this is the thing to do. But for the most part, I prefer them over behavior trees. I don't know if that's really... I might do a tutorial about that at some point. I don't really know if that's super like tutorial worthy, because it literally is just what I explained. I don't really know what else I could provide within a tutorial aside from... I mean, yeah, this is kind of all there is to it. I do it on a HP percentage. You could do it on a absolute value if you wanted to, maybe, but it's just getting your current health, dividing it by the max health. I do it times 100 to get more like human readable value. And then I have this compare switch set up to return different values, whether it's equal to or not equal to, or less than or equal to, whatever. Different return values. So that's the like consideration that I made. And aside from that, it's pretty straightforward, I would think. So I don't really know what I would do in a tutorial aside from just like explaining what I just did. Would be a really quite like short tutorial. I guess I could make just a very short, more like concepts oriented tutorial rather than like actual like concrete code, because the actual like physical code of what is happening, there isn't really that much to it aside from obviously programming out the abilities of each phase themselves. That's where a lot of code comes in, but that is also so like independent or individualized for whatever game you're making that there's nothing like super generic that I can do with that either. So yeah, let's open up some more state trees, because I have a filter here for state trees. So I have them all just in here, which is nice. There's basic daemon, we already have it working. Then we have the ghosts, which is this guy over here, which I already have fixed up as well. So we have a left attack and a right attack. I probably should give in the damage socket name for both of those, though. I'm not entirely sure about the damage socket, like the... Yeah, no, probably is good to give that in as a parameter. Just means that I need to go into the skeletal mesh every single time and find if I already have a socket for it, and if not, like what to call that socket. I have a socket for this called R8 socket for right hand socket, apparently. So I can just give that in here. and that should work. I can make a draw debug, I guess, to see if it works out. Yeah, that might be a little bigger than I thought it would be. 250 really that big? I guess it is. The annoying part about doing it this way now, yeah, that's a little too small now, is that I can't easily see the size of the sphere anymore within the animation preview, which used to be quite like neat the way I had it set up. But that's altogether not the worst thing in the world, I guess. I don't know, man. That doesn't seem like it's centered around that position at all. I know what's going on. I think, yeah, it's I need that socket to exist like all the way the fuck over here. That seems a bit more reasonable. Okay, so let's do that for the other guy as well, for the ghost. The ghost dude. Which has, I at least am consistent with the names between these two, which is a good start, I guess. So this would be also, like, just make that 50 damage sockets, right hand sockets. And then this would be the left hand sockets. I'm going to set the default actually for this in this tree to 50 as well, because I feel like 50 is probably a pretty good radius in general. And then let's make a draw debug for both of these as well. And after we've gone through all those, what actually damaged me there? Okay, sure. Sorry if this is relevant, but I'm having a problem and I can't see to solve it. When I'm in the editor and I have a Niagara effect, if I try to make them start later, move them further down the timeline. You mean within the Niagara editor or within like the cinematic sequencer? You are not actually doing the thing. What is it even fucking doing, man? This entire AI doesn't make a lot of sense. Hold on. So this just immediately goes to left. It should go to chase and hits. But that still doesn't explain the fact why it wasn't doing what it should have been doing. I assume you mean within the Niagara window itself, which is if I just go to any Niagara system real quick. I have one here, I think, that has a delayed start. Nope, that's not this one. Would be this one. Yeah, so you can technically, I think, unlock these to be trimmed, but really what you want to do is you want to move this keyframe. That keyframe is the point where an emitter actually like does its thing. And in order to do that, I think you don't need to do anything. this whole like green thing is just for like the loop delay, right? So if I set loop delay to being true, I believe. Hold on, is that the proper one? Where? It's not very intuitive. I'll grant you that like immediately. But that's that's the thing with Niagara in general. It's not super intuitive. Okay, let's. A loop delay might be. That's for the entire system. But yeah, if I just make a new emitter like this, it doesn't by default have a keyframe. What do you do to give it one again? I think you do maybe set loop delay. No, that's for the system. Oh, there we go. Life cycle mode, I think, is setting it to self and then... No? There is something, a setting somewhere for this. The end is movable. Yeah, so like this is just how long the emitter lives. And generally the emitter, you don't actually want to like move this beginning. As you can see, I have the same here. It's just you can set this keyframe up. It might be because it's spawn bursts. Hold on, if I set a... You can make them movable, but yeah, if you add a spawn burst, that's where you get that keyframe. That's what's happening. So for bursts, that is the way to do it. And I guess the reason for that might be that you could make a trigger more than once within a loop. Yeah, so that's the reason for that. You can make that burst trigger more than once within a loop, which is kind of neat. For things that have a spawn rate, it still should be possible to do this. Yeah, so if you go into the emitter state, you have a loop delay as well. And if you enable loop delay, then you can change the start position of this too. So now you can move that along, and you can see that this only, if I solo it, it only actually starts doing its thing wherever it is placed. But that for the most part is only relevant if you have a spawn rate, which still might be important to be able to do. If you have a spawn burst, you could still do that. But the more important thing to move around is this like little keyframe thing, because that is where it actually does the spawn. And that's something that I need. So yeah, took me a bit to figure out. Again, Niagara has a little bit of a mess with its UI. It's a super nice system, but its UI is a little clunky at times. I'm just gonna disable these two states real quick so that it can only do the physical attacks, because that's what we're testing right now. So why does it not work on you? Because it is doing this. And there's nothing else. It's kind of weird. Did I misspell the socket name on this one? Ah, it's the same. Okay. Let's add a breakpoint in. The weird thing is that it does work flawlessly on these demons, right? They all are trying to do it at the same time now, but it works fine on the demons. They draw the debug thing, and it's okay. It does actually play. Oh, I know what the issue is. So another thing that I changed is the signaling of when to deal damage. So I have this basic attack animation, and now I have this notify that says damage. So I need to put that into the animations for the ghost as well, specifically in the montages. Oh yeah, and this guy is also kind of fucked in its scaling always. So replace enemy damage sphere with that montage. Notify, please. Hello? Why are you not doing that? The post-processing I use, I don't have a tutorial for. I followed some videos from, I don't remember the name of the channel. But if you just, like on YouTube, search for physically based cell shading, you should find a thumbnail of a guy that has a cell shaded look on like some like elves or dwarves or something like that. That's a set of videos that I followed. It's not a very straightforward like tutorial video. So if you're trying to replicate it, there is quite a bit to it, and it is spread out over like 4 or 5 different videos of his. So it's not super straightforward to replicate. But that's the guy that I followed, because that goes into a lot of shader math that I frankly only barely get what it actually is doing. It's one of those things that I understand what it is doing, and I can tweak it well enough. I could never come up with it on my own. Because writing shaders is black magic. Yeah, don't need that to break anymore. But it does require writing some like custom shader code in a like expression node as well, because you need to, for the outline. It's really laggy today. For the outline, what you need to do is you need to loop over neighboring pixels in order for the outline to actually start looking good and not blocky and that kind of stuff. But Unreal's like default setup for a shader graph doesn't allow looping, so you need to like write that loop. Well, that's not good. You need to write that loop in like whatever. What is the name of the shader language? Like HL whatever. Always forget it. I think it might be using the wrong. sockets. Is it? This is right hit. Right socket, yeah, okay. I'm gonna just change these. That's the easiest way to fix this, I think. Just redefine what right and left means. That still isn't that good. But that might just be a timing thing now. It's partly a timing thing, it's also a location offset thing. I think that would improve it a lot. Why don't you use the notify window for damage? I mean, I am using a notify. Do you mean like this? The reason that I'm doing it this way is because with this type of notify, which is just a montage notify, you give through a name, and the play montage node itself has pins for when these types of notifies get triggered, and they give through the name as well. So I can just easily play montage and then have all of the damaging code connected up to this pin, and even have that damage name. And that way it's all held within the ability. So I can reuse the same montage technically with different instances of the state task. If I would need to. I don't know if I will need to. I kind of doubt that that's going to be too useful, but the whole name of the game for what I'm working on right now is to, as much as possible, parameterize and make effectively the abilities more like instanceable. Use switch instead of equal is better. It's not though. A switch statement is effectively just checking a bunch of equals back to back to back to back. Notified state. Because I only needed to do one frame of tracing to see if in that one frame it hits. For player attacks, I do use notify states because I want player attacks to be more lenient. So player attacks during the notify state, it checks the location of a sphere overlap every frame during the entire notify. For enemy attacks, I want that to be more lenient toward the player. So it's only an instant, like the frame that it hits, it does a damage check, and that way it becomes a little bit more in favor of the player. I don't need that to be checked over multiple different frames. It's still kind of weirdly offset, isn't it? I wonder what that is. Is it just doing it too early? Doesn't seem like it's doing it too early. Well, no, it's definitely doing it too early. probably good to have those hit at the same frame, actually, for consistency's sake. So which one is it? This one is, I think, frame 18. Man, my PC is slow today. Yeah, that's frame 19. So let's both have them on 18. That's a bit better. Okay, now do the other side as well, please. Oh, it's never going to do the other side, is it? Because this just does select in order. Should select at random. When it does it on the other side, it does seem... That might just be a location offset problem. Can we see... Can I see the relative position of these? Relative location. Okay, they should also be the same. Again, consistency between the two different types of this attack. I think the animations aren't the same. I think I actually... That's what happened. I animated these in Blender like fucking 2 years ago or something at this point, so I just made the same animation twice instead of mirroring the existing animation. So the animations aren't the same. They are close to the same, but they aren't the same. So probably will want to reanimate this at some point regardless because of that. But for now, I'm just gonna move this around a little. That's pretty good. Other side, please. Also pretty good. Okay. Ghosts. Normal attacks work. Let's move on to more other state trees. Then we have this one is just movement. This one is unused. This one doesn't have attacks. This one is a boss fight. This one is a boss fight. Reaper has normal attacks, I believe. Yes. So let's take a look at that. It has a normal attack here somewhere, surely. Hit player. Chase, hit player, steal from player. Okay, so here what we end up having is a situation where I don't think I can use the entire like subtree. I could. Kind of seems wasteful. Because we have a chase, and then when it reaches the player, it does one of two different things. But we still can very much replace this with my state tree ability for play attack animation. And then I think the Reaper also has a left attack and a right attack. So Reaper... left attack, yes. So let's give this a hit attack. Make this a child. Well, we'll do it slightly differently. Delete this, change this to select children at random, and then attack becomes just left and right. What is the difference between left attack hand and left attack? A lot of these I haven't looked at in a really long time. So let's look at all the things with left. Oh, so one is just a right attack. It's just named badly. Okay, sure. Which one is which? This is left hand. So this is actually the right hand. Let me browse to this and Reaper right attack. Rename that to something a little bit more reasonable. And then give it some sockets. From the hand, I think, would make the most sense. So add a socket. This would be what they're called LH socket, I think. The other ones. And move that down to about there. And then for the right hand, we do the same thing. Add a socket, but call it RH. Sockets. And then we just copy over the relative transform again, because I do want that to be identical between these. And then we go not Reaper boss. We have a bunch of things already open. Damage via socket name. Also probably make the default in the actual task. Go down to 50 because 250 is way too much. I think I tested it with maybe the boss fight or something like that, but no, that's way too much. Yeah, that largely seems alright, so let's copy that over. And then, kind of annoying that you can't paste them in here. What you need to do if you want to paste something is just put in something temporary and then paste it over top of it. Which is not a major issue or anything, but it's just kind of annoying. Why are you not giving me... Oh, add notify, there we go. Damage. Obviously the major downside to using names is that you can misspell them, which is always a little tricky because I am very prone to making typos. These also seem to be timed differently, man. I don't know what the fuck's up with that. Might be worth looking into as well. But that should, if I just disable this state real quick, pretty much make it only possible for him to smack me. That one seems pretty good. I think the one... Oh, he's also got a teleport attack still. The other one's still a little early. A little early. But I think that might just be the left attack. Maybe they are the same, been mirrored, and I just messed up a little. It does make sense to put it maybe a little bit more toward here. Yeah, so I did it here before, and now I'm doing it... actually don't know. if that's gonna make a notable difference. That seems good. Other side, please. That seems pretty good. Okay, so that's just the normal attacks for that guy done. Which brings me back to the next state tree. We just need to set these up to have a basic groundwork laid down, and then we can go in and actually move the code from a bunch of like gameplay ability classes into state tree task classes again. State trees are great, but there's still some annoying things. Yeah, there's definitely it's been improved still. So I kind of hope that that copy and pasting thing, for instance, like in a version or two, might be a little bit just smoother to work with. But for now, most of the things that state trees are annoying with are just like small quality of life things that it could be better with. But especially now that we have the parameters working since 2 versions or something like that. And state tree delegates as well, which is kind of neat. From like a purely functionality perspective, it's kind of like amazing. It would be great if we could still get like parameters values by names, just like you can with blackboards in behavior trees. But that's a altogether relatively small issue, depending on how you like design your code. I don't think you have a normal attack. You do. Because I added that a while ago. But that's not a chase type of thing, right? That's just a, yeah, that's a reactive ability. So, state tree abilities replace with state tree ability. Play animation, spider bite. Do you already have a thingy for that? I don't think you do. Bite location. You definitely do. I am a genius, turns out. And that's, I think, everything there is to this one. This should be relatively straightforward. Because there's no variations or nothing like that. Before we test this, this specific enemy is known to sometimes cause crashes, so let's save everything. Spawn in a few of them and see if they try and bite me. Well, they first try to run away. Okay, so their AI in general has a little room for improvement because they don't bite if they don't already have a target that they are protecting. But once they have a target that they're protecting, they will try to run away. And then, if I'm too close anyway, they will bite. But they... I made the same mistake again. I'm going to be making that mistake a lot as I get used to this. This new system, but we'll be fine. We'll manage. That's why I'm physically going back into this level every single time I make a change and testing if it works, because so many little things to forget. And my brain is, well, aside from barely functional, also just kind of fried at the moment. But yeah, that seems to have worked. So that's another state tree done, which means we're almost done with the basic attack animations now. I'm using a behavior tree and combination of state tree. In my case, I use state trees to make utility selection for attacks, similar to what From Software does for enemies. So, yeah, I effectively do the same thing in a way, I think. Because the way that I have my boss set up now is I have states and those states have state trees within them. Those state trees effectively, for the most part, probably could also be behavior trees. But the thing about state trees that's kind of neat is that specifically like state trees effectively are behavior trees as well. If you're working with more traditional like behavior trees and state machines, the distinction between them makes a lot more sense to use them both together as well. But with state trees, this being like this hierarchical like finite state machine, it effectively takes state machines and behavior trees and meshes them together, and it does create some new shortcomings. But it pretty much just gets you best of both worlds, in my opinion. But if I didn't have like this marvelous state tree system, it would effectively be a state machine with behavior trees that are run from the state machine. In this case, it's just a state tree that runs other state trees, because, again, the flexibility of the whole thing is quite nice. Where is my Reaper boss? Yeah, so here we have it. I have these different phases, and these phases, essentially, this is a state machine, and then those run a whole new state tree as a single state within that state tree. And this effectively kind of functions more or less as a behavior tree. Aside from the fact that it doesn't actually go back to the root, it just goes back and forth between passive and aggressive. But I mean, you could do that within a behavior tree relatively easily as well. So this just these are states and these are task pickers. The reason that I personally like these state trees over doing this with a behavior tree, which I could do, is the fact that it has this hierarchy of like child states, which means that if I wanted to do one thing alongside of another thing, when it is in any of these child states, it's also considered being in the parent states, meaning that it's going to do the tasks in all of the states in its current like hierarchy path. Where a behavior tree, it has the possibility to run parallel tasks, but the moment you get to a task, you can't then have it continue on with more like selection behavior as a child of that branch anymore. The behavior trees themselves are a little bit more restricted in that way, where once a task is picked, that is the end, that is the leaf of the tree. And state trees have a bit more potentiality for like parallel stuff there. I use behavior because I had several inconsistency with EQS with in states. I've had some issues with that too. The way around that for me largely seemed to be to move it into a system like this, where if you have the environment query and the thing that uses the output from the query on the same state, it kind of shits itself. It doesn't like that. But if you make a state with a query on it that then moves onto a new state once the query is finished, that seems to have solved most of those issues for me. And I think what is happening here is the query is technically an asynchronous action, I think. If I had to guess, I don't know that for sure, but I would imagine that it is, because it's also relatively compute heavy sometimes if you have a lot of like complex stuff in your query. So what it likely does if you put them on the same task is it starts this query and then it moves on to the next task, tries to grab the information from the query that it hasn't finished yet, and then fucks up that way. Whereas if you make this a task on a separate state, it's only going to move on from the state when the query itself is actually like fully finished. That is, I think, the reason that this seems to be more stable than putting them both on the same state. But it's one of those things that's kind of like counterintuitive and weird, because you would just like to be able to put this on the same state. And you should be able to, but it's kind of weird about it. And I think the explanation that I gave makes sense. I don't know that that's the issue for sure. But I also don't care enough to like look into it, because this solution seems to work fairly well for me. But yeah, if you're having trouble with environment queries, that is obviously a pretty big issue, because not being able to use them properly is a major downside. Yeah, so here we just have the... So this attack can just become... go back to circle player. This attack can just become the... Nope. Linked asset. Chase. And basic attack. And then we also gave this a... Okay. Yeah, so because this is now technically not a state anymore, right? I can't put other tasks on this anymore. So I guess what we actually do is something more like this, where we have a state which has that linked asset in it, so that we can still make a change speed. And I think I changed it to 1200. And this is what I mean with like this asynchronous nature. This task will run during the entirety of this subtree running as well. And this task, all that it does is, as long as you're in this state, you have a updated movement speed. And then when you leave the task, it sets it back to the movement speed that you used to have. Doing that kind of stuff in behavior trees is just a bit more of a pain. It's not impossible, but it's, especially as the tree grows a little bit more like complex, it starts being a little bit annoying, because if I want to have like 3, 4, 5 different abilities here on a behavior tree, I would need to add that change movement speed as a thing that it does on all of those leaves, instead of just like at a parent point in the branch. Again, I know that parallel execution is a thing that behavior trees can do, but it's a little janky. It's a little weird. And it's just a lot more intuitive the way that state trees do it. But yeah, that's the spirit one. Let's actually set up the spirit attack. Which we'll call damage as per usual, and then add a socket here, and we'll call that attack location, I guess. Pretty straightforward. Which is in this general area somewhere. I use an interface with enumeration to change the speed, and changing it all the time with the task is annoying. I mean, in behavior trees it is. In the state trees, I think that this makes a lot more sense, because this kind of just takes care of itself, right? Just slap it on a state, and whenever I enter the state, it increases the speed and it remembers what the speed used to be before you were in there. So even if while in the state, you do something to modify it, the moment you leave the state again, it just resets it back to what it used to be. Now, if you have a bunch of things that modify the speed, and you want those to persist, that might be a little bit more annoying because it will just set it back. But you could change the task to take into account any change that happened while inside of the state and task, if you wanted to. I don't really care because I don't really foresee that being a thing that I really care about. But within state trees, I think it's pretty straightforward. Within behavior trees, it is definitely a lot more annoying. Because you do have to slap on a different task onto your leaf nodes every point where you have to do it, or you have to use those parallel nodes. But again, I've maybe just not gone deep enough into behavior trees to really make them work very well. For me, they always were very weird and very janky. Those parallel things, but they might enable some more things to keep them on par with what you can do in a state tree with that hierarchical stuff. It just this is from the ground up more designed to do that stuff, I guess. And again, it's more of a matter of just being intuitive at the end of the day as well. I do wonder why obviously is so slow. Is it literally just a temperature issue? Don't really see it. I mean, it works. It didn't draw debug, but as long as it works, right? I didn't enable it to draw debug, so that makes sense. I also didn't give it in this. So let's try again. Yeah, having 4 of these at the same time is a little weird as well. Wait, what? Why don't you do the do? You should. I think the last update within the behavior system was put a cooldown by gameplay tag. So yeah, that's been quite a while. That said, having a built-in cooldown system for an entry condition or whatever, right? Being able to just I made my own very weird and not very well working cooldown system. But being able to slap on cooldowns based on gameplay tags or whatever into entry conditions for a state tree is one of the things that is definitely still missing from state trees. Matter of fact, I do it based on names, but it makes a lot more fucking sense to do it based on gameplay tags. So maybe I don't think I'm using it anywhere at the moment anyway. But I probably should revise that to be gameplay tag based. That makes a lot more sense, yeah. It doesn't really matter. They should add that as soon as possible to state trees, is the point. So why isn't this... Oh, that's why. Okay. That makes sense. By normal gameplay ability, what I mean is that I'm not going to be using the gameplay ability system for enemy AI abilities anymore. Because gameplay abilities aren't really super set up to be like hyper parameterized. Where state tree tasks do a much better job of that. I'm not getting rid of gameplay ability entirely because it has a bunch of super good stuff, like the attribute system, the gameplay effect system, which effectively works as like a status effect system, all like built in. I'm still going to be using gameplay abilities for the player abilities because doing that in a state tree doesn't make a lot of sense. But for enemy AI, I kind of found that why do you segment code into ability classes? To have compartmentalized code for specific abilities, to have a separate object, a separate class that's scripted out what that ability does. That's effectively what a state tree task does as well, is be a container for a specific bit of code that does a specific task. And what I used to have, and what I still have to a certain extent now, is a state tree task that then just runs a gameplay ability, but I can just have that code directly in its own task for the state tree instead. And the upside to that is that it allows me within designing the state trees to expose a bunch more parameters to make tiny adjustments between different instances of the same task / ability. Whereas the gameplay ability system isn't really set up to take in parameters. The way that you would do that in the gameplay ability system is to just make a separate like child class of that ability with different stuff given in. But that kind of becomes annoying to do when you want to have like one specific phase within one specific boss fight have a slightly different value in one of the fields. Make an entirely different ability class. Well, it's possible, it's fine. It just gets to be a little bit annoying, where if I can just parameterize all that stuff in a state tree task directly, it becomes a lot more user-friendly and a lot more like malleable to work with. So that's why I'm moving a bunch of the stuff that I have right now from gameplay abilities for AI into state tree tasks. And this is the last one with a basic attack. So, for instance, the one that we're doing right now, we have this new ability here. It's not this one, actually, it's this one, which has like play-based attack animation, which has a base damage, which actually should be all exposed as well. But because this is a task now instead of a ability, when I have all of these things exposed, whenever I go back into the state tree for it, we now have this on any place where you place this task into a state tree. We can just in the state tree set what the damage is that this attack should do, instead of having to make an entirely separate class just to change the damage. And especially within the, like, I've been working on boss AI. And if I want the boss to, in phase 2 or phase 3, do the same attack, but have it deal more damage, right now it's as easy as just going into that state and changing a number to be a higher number. Instead of having to make a variation of that ability to update that number. And it's mostly just a workflow thing. Using tutorial cooldown state trees with 5.5 update variables in the tree, but in 5.6 it breaks again, so went back to storing variable in a component. I haven't checked specifically for the cooldown thing. It might still like be broken. I don't see why it would be broken. I do know that setting parameters dynamically now just works since 5.5, and also I mean I am in 5.6, and I do I think, at a couple of points set parameters dynamically, or I did at least, and it did just work. And if you're just reading like a float value, that shouldn't really like be a big issue. So I don't see where it would break. But I also don't exactly remember how I suggested to do the like in-tree version. Because I think I just suggested making a float parameter in here, right? And just setting that and reading that. Because that's the most basic, straightforward way to do that. And that should be solid enough that it still should work. I still think that it definitely needs to be a built-in feature, though. Because that's such a fundamental thing. Wait, does this thing still have an abilities thing? Yeah, it does. Fuck off. We don't use you anymore. Go away. What I do want to do, however, is actually do want to promote this to a bunch of parameters for the base damage. Bunch of form has something to do with custom tick. Oh, God, that kind of makes sense. That kind of makes sense. Yeah, that's fair. I haven't really used custom tick rates that much on most of the things that I've worked with here. So that's probably why I haven't really run into the issue, but it kind of makes sense why that would break things, because that seems like custom tick on actors also is a little fucky. So I 100% would believe that it's also a little weird on states. That's another upside of doing states, by the way, instead of gameplay abilities, is because they have a built-in tick. It is easier to do certain things, where abilities don't have a tick, because they don't exist in the world, and they don't have... I don't really know why they don't have a tick, because they should be able to piggyback off the tick of the component that they get a run on, ideally. Because I assume that's what the state trees do. Well, at least that's what they used to, because now you can set a custom tick rate, so they might actually have like their own like tick loop as well. Yeah, okay, so that's kind of fucked if it is always an invalid thing with custom tick rate. Because being able to set a custom tick rate is real, like a real cool thing to be able to do for these states, especially if you have things that are relatively heavy to do, but you do need to do them constantly. Just being able to set a custom tick rate on the state instead of having to like set a timer within the state's task, because then it's like tied up into your programming, right? I really like the custom tick rate edition, aside from the fact that apparently it does like break stuff. Anyway, all that updated, we were going to do the zombie, which should be relatively straightforward. We can just... This is trying to select children in order, so either it is passive, and then it goes into aggressive. I guess we just make this into a state, and give this... I think it has a left attack and a right attack. I think. I'm not actually sure if I made a left and a right one for this. I guess we'll see. Zombie... Left and right. There we go. that should all be pretty much good to go. And then we have a right attack as well, which is this one. Then both of these need to be given sockets to match. No, not that one. There we go. Right hand sockets, and move that into a slightly more decent position. What does it actually do when it scales? It actually scales properly with it. I was not expecting that to work. I'm glad that it does. Damage, and then we do the left hand as well, which we'll do right there. Add sockets. Left hand sockets, and then we'll go back in, relative location, go back in, relative location. Notify, damage. There's a little bit of tedium into like replacing all this stuff. We're going to ignore all those things because I don't care. Oh yeah, and then we actually do need to give in the socket names for these as well. This is left hand. So that's the tedious part that we have now. Doing this based on socket name, which is a little annoying. I guess, can we actually bind that? That would be interesting if we could. Doesn't seem like we can. I was thinking maybe what we can do is get the actor that we're targeting, or get like the mesh and then get like one of the names from a drop-down menu or whatever. Doesn't seem like we can. It's not that big a deal. Just thinking that maybe that would be neat. So, what is that thing that keeps fucking attacking me, man? Is it this? I think it might be this. I like how the hand expands in the animation. I miss games that break bones to make things look more interesting. Yeah, I kind of want more animations to kind of lean into that contortion, or like in this case expansion, I guess, of that like a little bit more cartoony vibe. A lot of the things and a lot of the vibe of the game as a whole is like a bit more dark and moody than the initial like cell shading might have you believe. But I do want there to be like a balance between the like general vibe and color palettes being more moody and dark. Like I'm working on a purple themed dungeon at the moment, so that's like super the case there. But even the brighter colored ones, I do want there to be a layer of disturbingness to everything in the game. But I also do want that like more cartoon like influence where you do have like the exaggerated proportions, and the it helps with my lack of animation skill as well if I am allowed to exaggerate proportions on the model itself, because that kind of balances out the lack of actual like proper animation for the guy. But it creates a certain look that I like, and it's very in that regard, I am highly inspired by the way that the original Spyro games work, because that does a lot of this stuff, right? The original Spyro games do a lot of... might have been some of the earlier games that actually use bone animations. I know Crash Bandicoot, which came a little bit before it, is effectively entirely done with vertex animation, which is insane. But Spyro seems like it uses bone animation. But that does a lot of like weird stuff with like expanding and contracting, like posing. And I really like the way that that looks. Can you help me on this one? How to make a modular game feature work per player in multiplayer, for example. I have a loot system. But by default, add that to all. Yeah, that's a little... I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't really focus much on multiplayer stuff because it's a massive headache, and I don't really like playing it myself for the most part. I'm not a very social gamer. So I also have like very little incentive to work on multiplayer stuff. But this seems like... I also don't quite understand what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to give everybody a hat, except for the player that hits the loot item only. I don't know what that means. Like, do you not want the local player to have a hat, but everybody like else? In the end, what it comes down to is that you just need to have a list of all players, I guess. Which you probably could do in like the game mode, I guess. And then like iterate through all of them and grant them a certain thing, which obviously you would do on the server. And then except for the one player that you don't want to grant that thing to, just like don't grant it to that player. If I understand it correctly. If you do want a like asynchronous thing happening where one client sees certain players with hats and another client sees other players with hats, that becomes a little bit more tricky to do. Because at that point you need it to be purely visual. It cannot impact gameplay at all because you're gonna need to do that on the client side. But that means that the server won't know what's going on, so it can't use that in any game logic anymore. So for like purely visual things, if you do it on the client side, if you have like team affiliations with like different equipment, and you only want that to be visual on the client side so that both teams see something different when they look at opposing teammates, whatever. That could be a thing, but that becomes quite limiting quite quickly. Only the player that hit a loot item should have the feature, not all. I guess that's just dynamically adding a component to that player. Like if you hit that item, you just add a component to that instance of that player dynamically that contains the code to allow that feature to function. And you can dynamically add components quite easily in Unreal. So that's probably something that I would look at in that direction. It is containing that into a component that's easily added or removed. Did we test the zombie yet? I don't remember. I don't think we did. Well, it's not drawing any debug stuff, so that's unideal. That's also doing other abilities than the one that I wanted to do. It's also not hitting me. Okay, so what's up? First and foremost, draw deeper. Oh, it's just way too early. It just runs it way too fucking early, man. It also feels like one where probably it could do with a bigger... Yeah, it should run it like... Actually, it seems pretty good at frame 24 here. Is it just the other side that's way too early? If anything, this one seems a little late. Oh, it's just using the wrong side sockets again. It might just be using the wrong side sockets again. Oh, this one is definitely a little on the late side. Right hand, right. No, that seems good. Yeah, I also would prefer never to have to mess with multiplayer, because it's just a mess. It's just makes everything so much more of a headache, so much more difficult to deal with. On the other hand, it does force you into somewhat more like tight design constraints from like a code architecting perspective, which is probably actually a good thing for a lot of people, including myself sometimes. So it's got that going for it. Let's also just set this to like 150 instead, because again, it's got that huge ass like hand. Seems like it probably makes sense to have that be a slightly bigger damage box anyway. Love your game vibe. I mean, I've been loving it since like art assets are coming together a little bit more, which is really helping. Yeah, it's just it's the one where I think it's the one where he attacks from the right that is just like fucked beyond belief. Let's look at this from the top perspective. So yeah, that seems like a pretty good timing, man. That still was a little early. Huh. Is that another one that I didn't actually mirror? I did do it in Blender, and Blender's mirroring is a little fucked sometimes, so it might be... Okay, that seems pretty decent. That's the same side. That's the same side again. Give me the other side, please. Just give me the other side, please. Oh, you're not doing them at random. Nope, you're not. So they're always doing the left attack first, which is confusing because I could have sworn I did the other one, but apparently no. Well, what the fuck? It seems like it's executing here, but it must be just doing it on the wrong socket, right? Oh, it does do it on the other socket. What the fuck? What the hell's going on? That one seems to work fine. Can I give you a suggestion for melee combat? There's a free plugin called Melee Trace that saved me a ton of time. I don't know that I care for that. I think I know the one that you're talking about. If it is the same one that I'm thinking of, I don't think that's really gonna help me too much. But I guess it is just going off a little early. But I mean, it's dead on, man. It's dead on. Like, the issue that I'm having here is just weird. I don't know what's going on. Let's just put in a breakpoint. And see if I can notice what's going wrong. Okay, advance by a single frame. Does it not draw debug? Okay, there we go. So it is just going too soon. Did you spend money on your game, or are you planning to make everything by yourself? I spent a little bit on some temporary art assets in collaboration with Fiverr at some point. But I don't think actually I'm using any of those assets anymore at this point. So I am working with an artist at this point who is kindly donating their time and resources to help me get to a MVP for a vertical slice that I can hopefully submit to Epic Mega Grants to see if they can grant me a little extra room for budgets to hire some people. And who knows, maybe down the line, approaching publishers that might be interested is in the cards as well. Because while I am happy to do everything by myself, that does mean that the game is going to take forever to make. And if I had the money to like hire people to help out with certain aspects, things would go so much smoother and so much faster, and also end up being better, because I can't be super good at everything. I can be decent enough at a lot of things, but both faster and better quality sounds like a good idea, but I need the money for it. I don't have the money to pay people myself, so I need like some money infusion from like either Epic or a publisher or both if I wanna get to that, which is I don't know, maybe at some point. Right now I'm working toward this month getting, what the fuck is all happening here, man? Just want to see the damage sphere. Oh, there we go. It is the right hand, though. That's all that we needed to know. So yeah, this month specifically, I guess it's just doing it per frame, so I need to make sure that's in the next frame. I'm working like super hard, like a lot of extra hours to get the game into a more solid position to hopefully be impressive enough when I submit it to Epic Mega Grants. To create that extra, still isn't enough, man. To create that extra little financial room, partly for myself, mostly to hire on like extra help. sure, man. What the fuck? Why? Why is it overshooting that? I guess it doesn't have to be super precise. I'm just confused what's happening, because I guess from a gameplay perspective, it kind of does well enough, but now it's lagging behind it. It is because it is now like frame sensitive instead of time sensitive, I guess, because it's using... Huh. Okay, so I think what is happening... Where did that montage even go? What the fuck? Well, we can open up this way again. Okay, so I think what is happening is what this animation does. If you look at the frames here, right? At frame 23, it's here. At frame 24... Stop showing my YouTube dashboard. At talk is difficult. At frame 24... Just do it in a weird accent, it always works. It's too far along, essentially. Whereas the Notify itself, if the Notify is responsible for it, it can essentially fire between these frames because it fires once per game frame instead of once per animation frame. The montage seems to only update through the animation frame timing, is I think what is going wrong. What the fuck is up with the timeline, man? There we go. So this is frame 23, and frame 24 doesn't start until... But still, that should be pretty much where I need it to be. I guess we maybe just pull this back a little so that it is a little closer. Maybe that makes a difference. I think I'm also over focusing on this at this point, because I think that's pretty much good enough. It also probably seems like it is. Offset because the body itself rotates. Because if I just look at where its forward direction is, it pretty much nails it. It's maybe still a little early, but because the spine itself also rotates, it feels like it's lagging behind a lot. But if we look at the actual actor's true forward vector, I think it's pretty much getting it. Yeah, now it's overshooting. See, I didn't move it that much. I just moved it just across the frame line, I think. Which means that now it's overshooting disgusting amounts. That's not what I wanted to do. I guess I'll get rid of one or two of them. Nope, only one. I mean, that seems... It's pretty good. Can I just separate one of them, please? Thank you. I'm going to say that's good enough. I'm, again, way over-focusing on something that, in the grand scheme of things, does not matter. So let's draw debug off on these and... Alright, I'm going to set... You know what I'm going to do? Is I'm just going to close all of the tabs that we have open. And we're going to run through now for the projectile-based attacks. Which I already have set up as well. There's a lot less of these. So I know that the Ghost has a projectile-based attack. So we can re-enable these states. Yes. And then we have projectile attack here. And the thing is that this is a unique ability, I believe. Well, that's the wrong thing. Okay, so we have a normal fireball attack. And we have the blinding projectile. I think the blinding projectile is a unique ability. It is. So we'll copy over this code because it does some stuff a little different. Because it uses the... I think it does. Yeah, it uses just projectile velocity. Which is a little fucked anyway. Because it uses tracing, right? It uses a bunch of like little line traces to trace a arc. To see if it can hit through that arc. But it only excludes the actor or the object that runs this function. It doesn't have like a normal line trace by channel. It doesn't have an input for actors to ignore. So this should probably be a function that can be run from the base enemy itself. So the task could probably request the velocity from the base actor so that the actor itself can do the trace. Because right now the only way that I get this to work is to not trace, which is not ideal. It's fine, but it's not great. And then we have the other ability here, which is just a normal fireball attack. Which is fairly easy. So let's add into child state, which is blinding orb, and we'll have a fireball. That's probably gonna end up being something aside from a generic fireball, I want to point out, but for now, it's just a generic fireball, which is the projectile. And now I'm gonna have to steal some stuff from the actual ability because I don't know. I think I just played the normal attack animations for it. It's also got this weird like attack.shaman bolts tag to it, which is the fireball is also a unique ability. Why would that be? Oh, because it rotates toward the player. Yeah, that makes sense. Just gonna steal your ghost shooting ability montage thing animation. That's the word I was looking for. And then we have BP fireball for the projectile that we're going to be spawning, which is not a projectile. What? Well, we'll just spawn a base projectile. It's fine. We'll spawn it starting at this socket. We don't do some gameplay event anymore. What we do instead is we add a notify montage. For this one, I think I called it shoots instead of damage. So that's the reason that we're using names. I guess there's very rarely a reason to have to use a name, to be honest. I might eventually get rid of that if it ends up being too annoying. For now, it's probably fine. Does use the rotation of this as well. Ooh, it does. So yeah, that's maybe not ideal because the rotation for this is actually... Never mind. It's so fucked that that might actually just work. Huh. It probably should just use the rotation. Like find look at rotation to the player. But we can fix that up later if need be. So disable this, remove that. And now it should only be able to effectively do the fireball attack, I think. So let's see if it does. Or a projectile, it's not even fireball, technically. Yep. It's doing the do. It's, it do be shooting. It's a little slow, but that's what you get. So, that is the most straightforward projectile attack that this guy has. Now, what we need to do is we need to make one that's a bit more specific to that, like, blinding projectile that we have. So, a lot of the actual, like, effect code for the blinding projectile hitting exists within the actor.getSpawn. Yeah, names are one of those things where you shouldn't probably type them out if you're working with them a lot. They are nice to work with because they give very easy customizability. Beyond what like an enum would do. If you like, you could make an enum with a bunch of different options, and that probably would work as well. The thing is, like, this is not even a notify that I coded. This is just one that the engine gives you, and this works with the like play montage node. But I'm thinking, am I ever gonna have a montage that has a notify that I don't want this to respond to? Because I don't think that, practically speaking, I will. So getting rid of this might make sense. For now, I'm going to keep it. But it's very likely going to go at some point. Because, again, I don't know that that's going to be a thing that I... Like, do we have, like, a validity or, like, empty or none? I guess we could just check whether or not it's not equal to, like, none or something. Instead. But there could be an animation at some point where I want to do like one thing here and one thing there, and I have two different names for these, at which point it is nice to have it in there. And as long as it's not getting too much in my way, having that option available to me, without then like now deciding that I don't want to do that, and then if I ever decide that I do want to do that, having to go through all the animations at that point and adding them in with names. Which is a lot more annoying than having to type in or copy over a name like once every couple of weeks. Use a switch for montages. What do you mean? Like switch on name? Because that still doesn't really like fix the issue. Like that's on the montage side. The montage side already has just checking whether or not this is equal to shoot. The like annoyance comes in the fact that every time I have to add in one of these things, I have to like then go in and give it the name shoot. But I do need that to be in there. Well, I don't need that, but I want that to be in there to make sure that I can expand on this in the future if I want to. Like the annoyance side is on this side, not on this side. Like making this a switch like doesn't actually help me in any meaningful way. Because if I just make this like... I don't need this to do different stuff based on the name. I just need this to check whether or not the name that I'm giving in is the name that I'm looking for. So like a switch doesn't do anything for me here. Unless I make an ability that does different stuff based on the name that I give through, then of course I would, but yeah. I mean, the other thing is I can just copy the entire Notify over, and the issue is also just solved at that point. So, like, it's probably fine. Anyway, let's make a actually unique ability, by which I mean let's copy over the code that we have here and replace a couple of nodes that don't work outside of a gameplay ability context. So what we do is we have the state tree thingamajig. STA blinding projectile. And I'm gonna make this specifically just for the ghost. So what we do is we have an enter and an exit state. Do I need an exit state? I probably don't need an exit state. So enter states, just to be sure, add a call to parent function. The parent function doesn't do anything yet, but you never know. Then we set the actor's rotation to get context actor. There we go, because that doesn't work. I get player pawn. That all seems to work. Suggest projectile velocity, and that's actually all there is to it. I'm certain that it's supposed to also like play an animation at some point, right? Did I not copy that over? I just didn't copy over the play montage. That makes sense. What are you using for version control? I'm using Perforce, and it's certainly a choice. It's a little bit of a headache. But it's nice that Perforce allows for like big binary files, because Git, while being more intuitive from like a user experience perspective, Git also like Git LFS is kind of fucked. It's a bit of a mess, because it doesn't actually properly like store big files. It stores pointers to files, but that doesn't really help me when I want to back up those like asset files as well to like an external server. So Git LFS, no, I tried it, didn't like it. I used Plastic for a while, Unity version control, which was fine. Just the client was really kind of bad, and very unintuitive. But Plastic also, I wouldn't say it's like worse than Perforce at this point. And it's probably easier to set up because you just like you just pay Unity like a couple of bucks a month, and you have like way enough storage space on their servers. But right now I'm using Perforce on a VPS that is also only like a couple of bucks a month for me, and it's certainly a bit more of a headache. Tried using Git, didn't have a good experience. Yeah, Git is not great for like full Unreal projects. Git is amazing if you just have code. The moment you are working on like a full game project where you also have a bunch of assets, and the thing with Unreal is that a bunch of the things, like everything you make in engine, like your blueprints are assets and not like code files. They're not text files, they're binaries. And Git doesn't love those. So yeah, it kind of doesn't play super well with that. So for Unreal, I don't think I would necessarily recommend using using Git. That said, a lot of the issues that I'm having with Bearforce are also just the fact that I probably, like, the server that I'm connecting to is fairly slow. If you just have your Bearforce run, like, locally, or at least, like, to a local server machine on your own network, 90% of the issues that I'm having probably would disappear. It's just sometimes the connection is slow, and whenever I want to do something, it takes forever to, like, just revert or remove a file or whatever. But I don't think that's a Bearforce issue necessarily. I think that's just the fact that I am using a very cheap VPS that doesn't have any relays and is located in, like, San Francisco, while I am in Europe. So the speeds are probably just atrocious because of that. If I use a, like, better VPS or a VPS provider that would have, like, local relays, like, closer to me geographically, I imagine that a lot of the issues that I'm having also would be resolved. So, like, being 100% fair about that. Yeah, it's a little far away, which means that it's not, like, super great. And if you have an Amazon, like an Amazon, I don't know what they call it, but it's a VPS hosted by Amazon. They also largely just store that in, like, American servers, obviously, but they also have, like, server capacity throughout the world. So you can, like, effectively have relay service somewhere like in Berlin on Paris or whatever, which is much closer to where I am. So I can dump all my stuff to those servers, and those servers can then more slowly move that over to the American one. Which is fine, like, I don't mind that, but, like, I'm directly communicating to an American server, which means that, like, it's not stable. It's super not stable. But at this point, like, everything is hosted on that server, so it's also... Switching isn't, like, an easy, quick thing to do. So I'm kind of stuck with it, unless I decide to bite the bullet and set up the entire Bearforce system again on a new server, on a new host. Which I don't really want to do, because it was a bit of a painful process to set it up with some tutorials and some ChatGPT help. I think in the end, plastic is probably the preferable choice. I'm going to stick with Bearforce for this project, but once this project is finished in, like, 2050 or something like that, again, depending on the amount of funding that I do or don't get, if I move on to a new, like, big long-term project, I'm probably going to stick with plastic over Bearforce. But again, at the rate that this project is going, it's going to be a while before it's actually finished. So maybe by the time I finish this, I'll have a different opinion. But plastic seems a lot more just like Git, but with support for big files, where Bearforce is, like, fundamentally, like, quite different. And that means if you don't play with it on its rules, it kind of gets upset. Like, if you mess around too much accidentally, like, with your local files, without checking them out, which you shouldn't do, but you create a weird disconnect between your, like, local files and what's on the server, and then when you submit them, it kind of gets annoyed at you, which, again, is fair. But as far as I understand from what I've researched, I don't know if this is true, but from what I understand, the main difference is that things like Git, and I think also plastic, The server version is only like really resolving the versions of all the clients that exist, whereas Pairforce treats the server state of the project as the true state. So when submitting something to that, if there is any disconnect, it kind of like doesn't like that, where things like Git, and again, I think Plastic as well, just kind of roll with it because they're like, okay, apparently you did that. You probably should have told me that, but sure, this is now the way things are, I guess. It seems to deal better with that. It's one of those issues where if you just do things as they should be done, which means like properly checking out files when you try to work on them, this isn't an issue either way. But I'm an idiot. So here we are. Speaking of being an idiot, does this compile? It does. Does it work? That's the better question. I'm gonna say maybe not. I think it should work. Just about everything about this seems like it should work. So just what this does is it plays the montage, waits for shoots, and then it sets the actor rotation snapped to... It probably should actually do that on tick. Because I think this uses an interrupt, right? No, it doesn't. Okay. For now, it just snaps it. In a moment, we're going to put that in tick, I think, and interrupt this instead. Seems like a little bit of a better way to do it. Then it gets a projectile velocity and it spawns a projectile that then does all the actual, like, fancy stuff. I don't know why it keeps bitching. About this state tree in specific, because it compiles without too much trouble. I'm just gonna ignore it. So yeah, let's spawn in a ghost and see if they can do the thing. Do you do the thing? Well, they certainly do a thing, but not the thing. Because I have the wrong thing enabled. That makes sense. And this one doesn't actually have the thing yet. So blinding projectile. The thing! The thing has been thung. Yep. That certainly seems to be thinging. It also has a bit of an issue with not coming back down, doesn't it? Well, usually an issue I have. But yeah, it seems to not have a gravity scale. Let's try it again. Yep, and they're coming back down. They're hitting me. And blind effects. It works. Fantastic. And this is one of those things, this is being handled by gameplay ability. This is just a post-processing effect. It probably should be a widget, to be honest with you, but it's a post-processing effect that gets applied through a gameplay queue. And the gameplay ability system just says, hey, if you already have this effect, you're not allowed to apply that effect again. And when that effect gets applied, we spawn in an actor, and that actor adds in the post-processing, and when the effect is cleared, we remove that actor, and gameplay ability takes care of all that for you super easily, super smoothly. So that's one of those things where I'm not getting rid of gameplay... Okay, everything was unloaded for a moment here. I'm not getting rid of gameplay ability entirely, because it still can do this kind of stuff for you. It's just the abilities of gameplay ability, specifically for enemies, is really not helping me be like super smooth and modular in my workflow at this point. Now I'm going to be real with you. Everything else that we have left to do for abilities, I think, is relatively complex to re-implement. I think we have everything working for this guy now, though, which means that we effectively have 2 enemies fully finished. But next up would be this dude, if we're just going by like physical location, which has this steal from player ability. And the steal from player ability does all this. So it plays a montage, then it waits for a gameplay event that would be waiting for a notify instead. Then it remembers the MP that it steals and it subtracts the amount of MP from the player. Then we wait for this enemy to be damaged. When it is damaged, we give back that MP. We destroy the effects, apparently. And then we... Okay, actually, that's not that bad. We can definitely copy that over into a steal HP or MP. This is steal HP. We have both. Like state tree situation. So let's make a STA steal HP. Let's call it Reaper steal HP, just to be like super thorough with our naming. I made a hook like scorpions in Mortal Kombat. I don't know Mortal Kombat that well, but I can kind of imagine what it does based on what I know about Mortal Kombat and it being quite gruesome. But that's cool. Yeah, I like gameplay abilities, again, mostly for the player stuff and all the side stuff. I've just decided that for enemy abilities, it doesn't, for me, make a lot of sense to be coding those into abilities, but there's a lot of reasons for other games that it might still make sense to do that over stage rate tasks, to be like super clear. Especially if you get into like multiplayer games, which again I don't because I value my sanity, but a little of it I have left. But the fact that it gameplay abilities are like network predicted, I assume means that making your AI use gameplay abilities in a multiplayer game also means that it's more consistent what the AIs do, like how the ability unfolds between clients, which might be important for a like high pace or a competitive or even a co-op type like action game. Like let's say that you have like an actual real-time co-op Souls-like. They exist. There's not a lot of them, but they exist. Let's say you're making that. I can definitely see a situation there where you're coding things with gameplay abilities to ensure that both players are as consistent as possible with what they see from the enemy in timing, in behavior, in everything. It should be fine either way, but it's probably good to like err on the side of safety and stability there and stick with gameplay abilities even for your AIs. Since I'm making something single player, I don't really actually get that benefit. So we get this. Enter states. I wish there was a single like button click that you could do to just auto connect this up like this. Alas, I don't think there is. It's kind of annoying that you have to like get the mesh and then play montage through that to get the latent version of the function. I guess the issue is that there's just like 50 different versions of play montage at this point, which might not be ideal either. Like, this is the gameplay ability version, and this is the skeletal mesh version, and then this is the character version. Why can't the character version just have this one as well? Like, why does it need to be a non-latent version that just outputs the duration of the montage, which is good enough in a lot of cases, but especially with these like on-interrupt and blend out pins and stuff, this is so much more useful. In my case, the enemy uses the hook ability. If he grabs the player, he will pull them close to him and strike. The player can escape by pressing the button repeatedly. Yeah, so that's actually a really cool thing as well. That I really need to try to see how that's going to affect this, but I do want to make some more like binding effects type abilities as well, where you do have to like mesh your way out of a bind. I'm thinking that maybe the zombie could have one of those abilities, or I need to give some of these guys one or two more abilities. The basic demon, I'm thinking might be good with just having normal strikes. This one technically has a unique ability already, but I'm thinking maybe having either the zombie or the basic demon gain the ability to like bind the player in a similar way. And I'm not entirely sure, I'm going to be real with you, I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to deal with that, but I guess what I do is from the state tree task, give new action bindings to the player, and then bind to the player's inputs. Because I can't register input inside of these directly, I imagine. Because these are not actors. Yeah. Right? Yeah, I can't enable inputs on this. Because if I try to, this is probably going to not compile. Oh, it is. If I get player controller and I try to enable inputs, I think this needs an actor in, and this is not an actor, so this probably is not going to work. If I hook this up, I assume that it's going to stop wanting to compile. Yeah, so I can't actually do that. So I need to bind to something on the player for that or whatever. The way that I have that set up in my... I might just make it a single QuickTime event, but give the QuickTime event also like an amount of times that it needs to be triggered. That's probably the way to do it, right? I already have a QuickTime event system. So if I just give that an integer to count up the amount of times that you need to press it within a certain time, that's probably the way to do it. Yeah. Anyway, that's not really what I'm thinking about right now. For this, I'm not going to put in a notify name because it's a one-off ability that's not going to get like scaled up or anything. So we just do notify begin and kind of accept that that's the way that it's going to be. Then we do that and that. This needs to be context actor. I don't know. Why does this? Oh, it doesn't compile. That's why. Why did it compile before? Because it was in a different class. Okay, let me try again, actually, in that case. Get player controller. I still think that using my QuickTime event system makes the most sense to do that with, but I just want to see if I try to enable input on this, because again, this is not an actor, right? This is just like an object. So yeah, it's gonna scream at me about that, which is fair. This doesn't need to be cast because this already is an enemy base ref. That makes sense. So we can get rid of the casting node. And then this needs to be a variable. That needs to be the context actor, which doesn't need to be cast, which is fantastic. And now it should compile. Almost. Oh, and ability. Yeah, no, that makes makes perfect sense. We should finish task instead. So the interesting thing about this ability, right, is that it actually is an ability that ends when the player then interacts with the enemy as well. Very differently from like one of those hooks or bind type attacks, but this plays a animation, then steals the MP, and then waits until it is damaged, and then that ends the task, that ends the ability, the fact that this thing gets damaged. While this is running, it's going to be constantly fleeing, and I just have a subtree for basic flee behavior. We might be able to tweak that to be a little bit less janky than it is right now, because we need to delay for the time that it takes this thing to happen. So maybe what we can do instead is we can do this. We can make that send a state tree event. We could probably do that. Instead of this being a delay for 2.7 seconds, this is a delay forever. And then when this gets a event, the required event, let's say that we give that a tag of like ability, fucking just ability for now, I guess. Then it moves on to the next state. And that means that when it needs to start running away is right here, so we can send state tree event to the state tree itself, which might just be a little bit better. Because then if we in the future change the animation or whatever, we don't have to like fuck around with that delay anymore. Yeah, I think I like that. And then it just remains within this fleeing subtree, where it just finds a location, moves to that location. Then it waits, and then it finds a new location and moves to that location. And the way that it finds a location is just by generating a circle, I think, around the target context, which is as far away from the player as it possibly can be. So yeah, that's a thing that we can do. Now the thing is, we technically could parameterize this to be one ability that steals like specifically either health or mana or whatever based on parameters. I really don't think that I care enough to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to Reaper Steal MP. We're going to make that a copy. It might be better to parameterize all that, but I can't be fucked. So we just changed this to be called HP Stolen. Oh, this was already had the name wrong there. So we get the base attribute mana. I think it's actually player attribute mana. Divided by 2. Actually, I think I want to steal all the MP in this case. And then we damage player. What do we actually do there? That's a fantastic question. Because Steel MP is a different ability as well. What gameplay effect do we use for that? Oh, mana to 0. That, you know, that makes sense. Then all this is the same, except that this is VFX like MP stolen. Which I'm just gonna yoink from here as well. Oh, apparently I don't have a separate one for that. Wait, when you click on spawn system, how did I get the details panel on the spawn system now? I just did. What the fuck? That might have been because I had it selected in here, I guess. Oh, no, that's just the class defaults has that. Okay, never mind. Yeah, that's fine. I just got a little confused there. So this makes it go blue, where this doesn't need that because the default is green. Okay, sure. So we just copy that over so that it does the same. And this is all pretty much the same thing as well, aside from the fact that this is at MP. And this is, once again, using a parameter, which you also need to copy over. I realize now. So that we have that in there as well. Does it copy over the default value with it? It does. So yeah, this should pretty much be the same dealio now. So let's test that, and then I'm gonna probably end the stream, because my brain is kind of finished for the day. Is this Reaper or Reaper boss? I think this is just basic Reaper. Yeah, steal from player. So we replace this with the state tree ability Reaper, steal HP. Replace this with steal MP. Then this becomes delay forever. And we take the transition, put that in there. That pretty much should be it, I think. Let's see. Didn't spawn him in. Let's see. Okay. Do you teleport away? You try to hit me. You also try to hit me. You teleport away. You teleport away. Try to steal my shit. Come on, try to steal my shit. Why are you doing nothing? That's worrying. It's probably the teleport attack that also needs to be changed up, but yeah, I think after they do that attack, they just get stuck. Nope, it's something else that gets them stuck. think it's sometimes after they chase me, maybe. This has a utility weight of 1. This has a utility weight of 3. That's fair. Let's just disable this for now, because I just wanted to steal. I'm guessing them trying to do the steal ability is what's getting them stuck. Yeah, so something is kind of fucked about that. Steal stats is a subtree. Try selecting children at random, either steal HP or steal MP. I guess neither of them works, so it doesn't really matter. Oh! It's not playing the fucking montage. Yeah, that'll do it. Reaper MP Steel, that's also technically, I think, a different montage, both of them, because they spawn different particles, right? So that's MP Steel, and I have an HP Steel as well. So let's set up both of those in their right positions, and then we'll actually give them, instead of using a send gameplay event, I will just send a montage notify, which doesn't need a name, I don't think. So that should improve that. Okay, he stole my MP, he stole my HP. I don't actually have my HUD to see whether or not that worked. But that seems to pretty much do what it needs to be doing. Because when I hit him, he is now able to do other stuff. So yeah, that leaves only the teleport attack on him. And then he's also pretty much finished. And then we've got a bunch of revenge abilities as well, but well, that's future me's problem. So thanks everybody for hanging out, giving me ideas and that stuff. And I'll be back on Thursday, likely still working on this. Or Friday. I'm so used to saying Thursday. I've changed my second stream day from Thursday to Friday. I'll be back on Friday, likely still doing this. But I've kind of had the idea. I posted a community post about this as well, and I talked about this in the previous stream. I've had this idea about splitting my 2 stream days, one for active development and one for like gameplay research. So maybe on Friday we won't be doing this, but on Friday instead what I want to be doing is I want to play through some sections of Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and 3. Preferably all of them in one stream, just to see how like groups of enemies behave. We've done this now for boss fights in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. I don't think I care about boss fights in 3, so I've not done that one. Also, I don't have a save file with that already. So I might just like run through Kingdom Hearts 3 on like easy mode cheats just to like clear a save file so that I have it to experiment with. But I might just play through a little bit of 1, 2, and 3 in one stream to see how the AIs behave in groups and how I can get inspiration from that and how I can maybe like change my enemy AI, because right now they all have like a very individualistic way of dealing with things, and I'm thinking either they might need to like have a overarching state tree that decides which enemies are aggressive or allowed to attack at which point, or they need to have some sort of like attack and movement queue, which might be directed by, again, either a stage 3 or maybe like the game mode or whatever, where if they want to attack, they first check in whether or not they're allowed to attack, which is based on whether or not other things are also already attacking. Right now I have a system like that for aggression. That doesn't work that well. I want to kind of feel out how Kingdom Hearts 1, 2, and 3 all do that. Because there's definitely fights in all of those games where there is a bunch of enemies around you, and I kind of want to see how those games deal with larger amount of enemies. So definitely one of the things I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be looking at the 1,000 Heartless Battle in Kingdom Hearts 2 to see how that deals with it. Because while there isn't 1,000 active AIs working in that battle, because a lot of them are just sprites that are waiting to load in when other enemies get killed and cleared out, there is like dozens of active, like actual enemy actors around you at the same time there, and they don't all pile onto you. So I suspect that specific sequence also has different AI programming from normal enemies, though, because what I expect happens there is it actually is a manager object that is giving tasks one at a time to specific enemies instead of the enemies themselves deciding what they want to do. Because if you have that many enemies, I think that makes a lot more sense to do. But yeah, I want to kind of experiment with that. So maybe that's what I'll be doing on Friday. Or maybe I'll be doing more of this. I don't know. It kind of depends on what I feel like. But I like the idea of splitting streams to, like, Tuesdays be working on things in engine and then Fridays being a little bit more research focused, at least for the time being, as I'm very much working on finalizing my workflow methods for a lot of stuff for the game and for, like, specific enemy AI at the moment. So yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna head out of here. I'll see you all later again. And there'll be videos in the meantime to keep you warm. So, see ya!